Good morning, everyone. It's 8 o'clock, so we should begin. It was certainly a guiding not principle, but attitude, certainly of Gurudev and Guruji, that we should respect times, so that we should start on time. So, with that, please close the eyes. Let us turn our attention within, focusing our concentration on the simple movement of our breath. Reminding ourselves of the significance of this breath. This breath is the perceptible manifestation of God. Namaste Vayu, O breath, we bow to thee. Twameva prakyaksham brahmasi. Gurudev taught to love the breath is to love God. And to love God in every breath is a form of continuous prayer, living a life of breath consciousness. Gurudev taught is the true spirit of religion and the practical way to love God. So in our time together, let us make a little extra effort to simply remember our breath. Let's begin chanting Om 3 times together. Guru Brahma Guru Vishnu Guru Devo Maheshwaraha Guru Sakshat Param Brahma Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I bow to God, to our Gurudev Paramahamsa Hariharananda, to our Guruji Paramahamsa Pragyanananda, to our exalted lineage of Kriya Yoga masters, and I humbly bow to the living presence of God and the masters within us all. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahana Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvi Navaditamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. And I humbly pray the masters will use me as their instrument and guide this talk. Om, 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 Amen. Good morning, everyone. Welcome. It's my privilege and opportunity to share some of the teachings that I have gotten through my study and association with our masters, and that which speaks to me is that which I will try and share with you. So I thought today something that's always attracted me is a certain element of Buddhism. Guruji if I can find it here. Wrote a nice little book called Gautama Buddha. And some of the teachings from that and some other resources I'd like to share with us this morning. Buddhism is particularly nicely aligns with Kriya for me in one aspect that Gurudev was born on the full moon day in May in his year. It was in 1907, it was May 27th, but the Buddha was born on the full moon day in May. And these things are not, I believe, are more than just coincidental. Interestingly, on this day, the Buddha, Gautama Buddha, as he's called, apparently, Guruji writes in his book, there have been other Buddhas, I think 7, he says, and one more will be coming in about another 2,500 years. So it's a profound tradition. Anyway, the Buddha was born on this full moon day in May, achieved enlightenment, nirvana, on the full moon day in May, and left his body on the full moon day in May. Gurudev was born on the full moon day in May and took sannyas on his birthday. Now, whether that was a full moon day or not, I'm not sure, but an interesting correlation. So a little bit about, to begin with, I want to read a little writing from the foreword to Patanjali's Yoga Sutras by Lahiri Baba, Lahiri Mahasaya, that really sets the tone of the human condition and aligns very nicely with the whole Four Noble Truths of the Buddha. So Lahiri Baba writes, every living being out of desires and expectations gradually accumulates karma, and as a result experiences birth again and again and enjoys the miseries arising out of old age, death, and the like. Therefore, desire is the seed of the world, and even without expecting miseries, it is inevitable that one has to pass through misery when one is enjoying the pleasure of the world. There is variation in pleasure and misery, happiness and unhappiness, due to variation in good and bad deeds. So, when one wants to experience pleasure and happiness in the world, one also has to get sorrow and suffering. Real happiness can only be found in peace. How can one attain that peace? Good question. So this leads me to a kind of a teaching of Guruji where he talks about happiness. So what is happiness? This is from the book Freedom from Fear. And Guruji makes the point that most of us are kind of under the delusion that happiness will come when our desires are fulfilled. The only problem with that is desires will never be fulfilled. And because Gurudev used to say that as well, desires are endless. But what Guruji says is happiness comes as the result was, let's say we have a desire for something, and then we get it, whatever it is, then we become one with whatever that is, the object of our desire is. And for a time, our mind is quiet. And this is what happiness is. The happiness is not in the object. The happiness is really in the state of mind. So just think, for example, after you've had particularly a very nice meditation, how do we feel? We feel at peace, and we feel a real sense of happiness and contentment. And why is that? All that we've done then is really calmed the mind. And then what happens, because of the rajasic nature of the mind, is desires then start bubbling up again. We start looking for some other state, some other desire. And interestingly enough, it's also been said that the nature of the mind is something, this is something to reflect on, that the mind wants to want more than it wants to have, which is interesting because, and think about it, we've all experienced, we want something. And when we want something, desire comes kind of wrapped a little bit in an imaginary glow, moha, infatuation often, and that we think it sort of gets a little halo over it, that we think, oh, this is really going to be great. So then we pursue it, we get it, we're happy with it for a time, and then all of a sudden, the bloom comes off the rose, as they say. And we can either lose interest for it or we want something else. So when the masters say, watch the mind, this is sort of one more thing, to be aware of the mind, how it works. And there are certain aspects of the mind that really work automatically, almost implicitly rather than explicitly. And it can be really helpful to be aware of what those things are, how the mind projects scenarios on something, how the mind implicitly will generate assumptions based on some kind of certain scenario, which will then influence our actions. This might be, as it might be somewhat a form of self-preservation, but it can also really take us down, can create more problems for us because we are basing our actions on an assumption which can be faulty. And the reason I bring this up is that often this isn't even explicit. This is more coming from our more subconscious mind, if you will. So it's a good idea to sort of watch the mind and analyze the mind and ask ourselves sometimes, well, why am I thinking this? Why am I feeling that? And sort of take it a step and try to get to the cause that's creating these effects. Anyway, so this is happiness. As Lahiri Baba says, real happiness can only be found in peace. How can one attain peace? So, from the Buddhist point of view then, comes the Buddha's Four Noble Truths. Now the Buddha, just to give a brief background, was the son of a king who was born in the month of May, as I stated, in the year 563 BC. So if we do the math, I'm not sure, I guess next May Buddha would be what? 2,583, 84 years old. He was born in a small kingdom in the foothills of the Himalayas named Kapilavastu, which is in present-day Nepal, and was given the name Siddhartha Gautama Sakamuni. There was a kind of a beautiful story they tell of his mother, I'll share with you, had a dream in the early morning, which is considered auspicious, that she dreamt she was lying on a beautiful bed and 4 angels came and carried her bed from the palace to a lake in the high Himalayas. She was given a cleansing bath, and while sitting under the shade of a tree, she saw a white elephant coming towards her, carrying a white lotus. The elephant circled her 3 times and then entered her womb. This dream was later interpreted to mean she would give birth to a divine child. And shortly afterwards, she became pregnant. After the baby was born, the father had a very highly evolved person, astrologer, do the baby's chart. And what the astrologer said was that this child would either be a great emperor or a great spiritual being. So the father's desire was that, well, I don't want him to be a spiritual being. I want him to continue my legacy and be a great king. So what he did was he had little Siddhartha grow up in kind of a life of obviously privilege and luxury, where he never saw the realities of life. Everyone who worked in the palace was young and healthy, and everything around him was any kind of misery of life was kept away from him. So, and he was then just living a very luxurious lifestyle. So the father would keep his mind from wanting to take him into a spiritual direction. At 29, the Buddha's married now, and the father thought, okay, he should be pretty established in this. It shouldn't be a problem. And I guess allowed him unrestricted ability to leave the palace. So he took 4 trips, apparently. And the story goes, on the first trip, for the first time, he saw an old man, and he who was just struggling with the joys of old age. Hair turning gray, eyes not working, ears not working, hunched over, struggling with the result of old age, which he had never seen, which shocked him. Then he went out on another trip. He saw the effects of sickness and disease. On the third trip, he saw a dead body being taken to the cremation grounds, all of which he had never had witnessed before, and this affected him profoundly. And the fourth trip, when he went out, he saw a monk, and this monk radiated peace, happiness, fearlessness, joy. And the Buddha then put together that clearly this monk, this sadhu, really had sort of found something that was worthy of exploring. So at that point, he decided he left his wife and newly born son and left the palace and began a period of 6 years where he practiced all kinds of different spiritual practices until he attained nirvana. In that time, he practiced some really extreme disciplines like fasting, to the point where he got so thin, if he touched his stomach, he could touch his backbone, his spine. And he found that because of starving the body, it also influenced the mind, that he couldn't meditate. And he almost died from it. But a young woman, Sujata, I believe her name is, came to him, found him, and started bringing him food. And slowly he regained life. And then he achieved nirvana. And I've read, but what I believe is ultimately his final practice was sitting under the Bodhi tree, was simply watching the breath. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? So he realized through this extreme asceticism that this was not the way, and he taught his followers that the path to follow was the path of the middle way of moderation and balance in all activities. And in our practice, this is really stressed as well. This idea of the middle way. What we are looking for is balance and consistency. It's interesting, Guruji in the book explains that the term Buddha itself refers to a person who has attained enlightenment and has, through one's own insight, freed oneself from the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. And he points out that Hindus consider Gautama Buddha as an incarnation of Lord Vishnu. So this is a little bit of the background. Excuse me. So I don't keep coughing. So in his first Dharma talk that he gave at the Deer Park in Sarnoff, which is a little outside of Varanasi, he gave his first talk. And at that first talk, he spoke of the middle way, apparently, and he talked about the Four Noble Truths and then the Eightfold Path. So, what are the Four Noble Truths? The first one is suffering is part of life, inescapable. It's what Lahiri Baba was referring to that I read earlier. And there's a nice little poem by Maya Angelou I've always loved that sort of speaks to this, life in a nutshell. And she writes, "Birthin's hard and dying's mean, and life's a struggle in between." Suffering is part of life, inescapable is the first noble truth. The second noble truth is the cause of suffering. What is the cause of suffering? And the Buddha says the cause of suffering is desire, and attachment, craving and clinging. And we'll explain why that's a problem in a minute. We so long the idea of we want things. Why? Because we want to feel complete. We want to be content, to feel complete. And the problem for that is we don't really know that which in us, which will give us that. So this is avidya, is the cause of all our miseries, as is stated in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. This avidya, this unawareness of the reality of the truth of universal truth, is the mother of all our miseries, which are then followed up by asmita, ego. We then have, since not knowing who we really are, we have created a false self. This false self then has divided our experience into raga and dvaisha, that which we like and that which we don't like. So those are the first four, and the last one is abhinivesha, which is clinging to life and the desire for sensual pleasure. So all of this is kind of what's driving this. And this is the cause of our suffering, desire and attachment. The elimination of suffering is the third noble truth, is possible through dispassion. The elimination of desire, vairagya, which we have heard from the teachings in the Bhagavad Gita, as well as in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, abhyasa and vairagya, some kind of practice, and this idea of dispassion, learning to let go of desire. And desire is really, and our attachments are something that's really a positive thing to reflect on. Just look how attached we are to certain aspects of our life. And this is the cause of a lot of our problems. And the fourth noble truth are, the way to achieve this, the elimination of desire, is the Eightfold Path. It is the middle way between the two extremes of excessive self-indulgence and excessive self-mortification, and it leads to the end of the cycle of rebirth. Otherwise, as Lahiri Baba says, then we keep coming back. And as he puts, somewhat facetiously, he puts it, we get to experience birth again and again and enjoy the misery arising out of old age, death, and the like. So the Four Noble Truths: suffering is inescapable. The cause of suffering is craving and clinging. The way to eliminate this suffering is through dispassion, starting to deal with this attachment and desire. And through the Buddha's approach to this is through the Eightfold Path. So what is the Eightfold Path now? The first of the Eightfold Path, and all of these, they aren't a sequential step, they are interrelated, we are told. The first of the Eightfold Path is right view, right understanding. There's a certain element of discrimination involved with this. Guruji writes, to understand the world, it must be viewed as it is, with an intelligent, open, and objective mind. Perception must be clear. People and things must be seen as they are, without the cover of Maya, of illusion. And part of our challenge with this is that our minds are so biased as a result of our past activities, and so much of this generated really is, as I said before, is implicit. We're not really even aware of it. But our minds are colored by our experience, and then our mind projects these different scenarios. And this creates our world. The Buddha in the Dhammapada writes very beautifully, we are what we think. All that we are arises with our thoughts. With our thoughts, we create the world. Think and act with an impure mind, and unhappiness will follow us as surely as the wheel follows the ox that draws the cart. Think and act with a pure mind, and happiness will be unshakable like our shadow. So this idea of the pure mind is interesting. And Guruji has shared in one of his talks that Adi Shankaracharya says that there are 6 groups of impurities. He said the first is raga, liking, preference, attachment is an impurity of mind. It's binding. The second one is jealousy, comparison, and the resulting envy and such that can come from that. The third impurity is thinking to harm others, revenge. This is another one. Notice, just to watch the mind and how carefully, if somebody slights us or we feel slighted or whatever it is, how the mind will want to generate some kind of scenario where we get back, where we get even, where we get whatever. It could be as simple as getting the last word, whatever. But it's a dynamic of mind. We're attached, we're clinging. The other one, the fourth one, is intolerance, finding or imposing fault on good things. This can relate kind of back to this jealousy as well. When you see something that either you don't have or somebody else has, then rather just appreciating it for what it is and being unattached, we then find fault with it, which then is a way of justifying why we don't have it. The fifth is dvesha, dislike, hatred, and anger. And the sixth impurity of the mind is the inability to digest harsh words or situations, criticism, or humiliation. So these are quite profound, all of which then are these, he's calling these the 6 groups of impurities. So in order to have right understanding, the Buddha says we need to understand the law of impermanence. What creates suffering is we cling to that which we can't hold, which by its very nature is going to leave us. Everything born must die. Nothing is permanent, nothing is forever, yet we attach ourselves and we want stability. We don't particularly like change. And the nature of life is such: we are born, we grow, then we decay, and then we leave the body and the body goes back to the earth. And this is the law of impermanence. Whatever we have, we could see a way to think of it that's helpful is to think of it just as a gift of God. God gives, God takes away. We should enjoy it to the full while it's given to us, knowing that it's not ours. And when it goes, let it go. This is really a major step toward eliminating suffering, because there's stuff that is, as much as we want it, we cannot cling to it. We need to understand the law of karma, that actions have consequences, and also that we have to face the results of our own karma. As Lahiri Baba says, if we have pleasure or pain, is the result of our good and bad deeds, that we are the makers of our destiny. Guruji really stresses this. The masters really stress this, that we shouldn't dwell on the past, that we should generate a better future through our actions in the present, and really take more control and acceptance of our situation as it is. And the third thing is we need to understand is the interconnectedness of all things and all beings. No man or woman is an island. We are all the result of this interconnectedness of the universe. The second of the Eightfold Path is right-mindedness, right intention. Guruji states the seeker's mental state should be immersed in extreme calmness. It is crucial to maintain a positive mental attitude, which will reflect the way we look at life. And I try to think it's trying to keep the mind peaceful, positive, and proactive. Now, this will kind of come back to with right effort. And this is something that we can cultivate and really work towards. We can control the mind. How do we do that? Well, we've been told again and again, through breath control. Working with the breath, we can control the mind. And we want, again, try and keep the mind peaceful, positive, and proactive. So right intentions is part of this right-mindedness. And the Buddha said that we should cultivate the intention of renunciation, resistance to the pull of desires. So just as a practice, start to be aware of our desires. What we choose to do about it is another thing, but try and make the implicit more explicit. This is really, I always kind of think of this as Gurudev says, Swadhyaya, study yourself, Presume not God to scan. The proper study of mankind is man, is a poem by Alexander Pope that Gurudev often used to quote. So now that we're kind of aware that this is a dynamic within it, start to look at it and assess it. The second intention is the intention of goodwill, meaning resistance to the feelings of anger and aversion. We should try and generate a feeling of goodwill to all. And the third, the intention of harmlessness, meaning not to think or act cruelly, violently, or aggressively, and to develop compassion. Guruji has mentioned that in the Mahabharata, that it's mentioned time and again, ahimsa para dharma. The highest dharma, the highest righteous act of ethical, moral living, then, is ahimsa, non-violence to all beings in thought, word, and deed, which is not easy, but again, a practice. The third of the 8 steps now is we've gone from kind of more cognitive, more mental into interpersonal, the first being right speech. Guruji writes, words are powerful weapons. They can be used to destroy or to bring the light of love and knowledge. It's been mentioned that we should really aspire to speak truth with kindness, never use truth as a weapon. Just because something is true doesn't justify hurting someone's feelings with it. Is something to reflect on. Guruji says there are really only certain people, most people have difficulty digesting bitter truth. And there are a few people where it's appropriate for them to administer this bitter truth, but it's not for all. And in general, that this is a good little thing to remember. Speak truth with kindness. Never use truth as a weapon. And we often see that being done. So what are the 4 practices? Excuse me again. Number 1, don't lie. Tell the truth when you speak. Speak honestly is the first. Second, don't slander. There's no reason, and be aware when we do it, if nothing else, and it's very common. We do it all the time. Don't use harsh words. Be careful of the language that we use. Don't gossip or engage in idle talk. A way of putting it is there's really no need to confess other people's sins. We love to do it, but as a practice, notice how often we want to do that. Talk about others. And usually when the gossip is juicy is when we have more of an attraction to it. This is not helpful. This is not useful. It's a bit of a negative indulgence. And as the Buddha is suggesting, it is something we should avoid. So, right speech means to tell the truth, to speak friendly, warm, and gently, and to talk only when necessary. Number 4, right action. Guruji writes, when a seed is planted in good soil, it produces a good result. Constructive actions set off a positive chain reaction. Never harm others through wrongful actions. So, we should obviously abstain from hurting others, really, particularly through our words or our actions. We're told that thoughts reach people as well. Try to avoid negative thoughts, negative words, negative actions. Not so easy. We're kind of programmed to do that. There's whole industries, as we see in the media, that are based on exactly this. Abstain from dishonesty, stealing, taking that which doesn't belong to us. Abstain from sexual misconduct. Guruji has written in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, we shouldn't waste this vital energy, this virya, I believe it's called, and we shouldn't allow the mind to dwell on sensual sexual pleasure, which is really a really strong pull from the second center. So this is a dynamic within us, and it's something that we need to deal with appropriately. Right action means to act kindly and compassionately, to be honest, to respect the belongings of others, and to keep sexual relationships harmless to others. Number 5, right livelihood. Guruji writes, cultivate self-awareness and try to have a positive impact within society. We owe our well-being to society as a whole. Our family, friends, and teachers have contributed to our growth. In turn, we should contribute within our capacity to help other living beings. So there are 4 suggestions. The first is, don't deal in weapons. Don't deal in living beings. He suggests raising animals for slaughter, slave trade, and prostitution. Don't be involved in meat production, butchery. Don't be involved in dealing with intoxicants, alcohol and drugs, etc. So the idea of a livelihood that is contributing positively some way to the whole will contribute more to our happiness than these other forms of making a living. Number 6, right effort. Change is possible through discipline and mental effort. Only through our own exertion can we progress in the spiritual path. This is something Guruji emphasizes time and time again. It's really in our hand. Our destiny is in our hand, and as ye sow, so shall ye reap. How much effort we put in will determine what we get back. Be sincere and constant in spiritual practice, which is not always easy. Skillful actions and an intelligent, God-conscious lifestyle will open the door to liberation. So, in this right effort, there are 4 things that are suggested. Prevent negative mental states from overwhelming us, because as we watch our mind, we can watch as these states start to arise in us. At that point, they're easier to stop than when they overwhelm us. When they do overwhelm us, do what we can to abandon them. How can we do this? Again, if we have the capacity to remember our breath. Taking a deep breath will really take the energy out of these overwhelming mental states. Awaken positive mental states, keeping the mind peaceful, positive, proactive, is something that we can encourage, and then maintain these states. This is what they're calling right effort. Number 7, right mindfulness, right attentiveness. Guruji says, remain constantly alert. How do we do this in our practice? Through the breath. Learn to discern negative influences. Negative emotions or thoughts are defined as a state that causes disturbance within one's mind. psychological distress. These include anger, greed, jealousy, hatred, and ignorance. All of these impurities of the mind and how the mind will gravitate to those. Our lower nature will pull us into these states. Cultivate positive emotions like compassion, kindness, love, and keep good company. So we need to be aware that the mind, as I said before, will jump to conclusions which are not often accurate if allowed to, which then create problems stemming from actions derived from faulty assumptions. And we see this time and time again, the mind projecting a scenario on someone. I mean, we've all heard the phrase, don't judge a book by the cover, but we do judge books by the cover. It's a natural projection of the mind. And if we don't catch it, if we don't watch it, if we aren't aware of that dynamic, it will be very present within us. And we kind of continue to water it unless we get some kind of a handle on it. So just be aware for a start of what the mind is doing. Remember that we are not the mind, but the mind does seem to be somewhat of an independent entity. Guruji has said time and time again, he said, the mind is a treacherous friend. Something that I really have taken to heart, and my own relationship with my mind is being aware of that. And sometimes things will get thrown up into my mind and I'm thinking, why are you doing this? Why are you creating this? And obviously it's as a result of something I've done, but to start to separate this idea to develop a relationship with your mind, to sort of almost look at it as a separate entity, I think can be very helpful in learning to train it. The last of the 8 is right concentration. Guruji writes, meditation allows the speaker to control the mind instead of being at its mercy. Remain focused in spiritual practice and meditation in order to reach the state of absolute awareness. Beautiful. So getting back to our question Lahiri Baba raised, how can one attain peace? Lahiri Baba's answer was, there is no other means than the practice of yoga. Through sincere practice of yoga, the indomitable mind can become peaceful. And through the grace of God and the masters, we have been given this practice of Kriya Yoga. So this is a real blessing, as this is such a profound path and profound practice. And I would leave us with one in my little study to organize my talk. I came across this quote, which I found very beautiful, about Lahiri Baba. This was from Swami Premananda, who wrote a beautiful little book called The Sayings of Lahiri Mahasaya. And he writes, the guiding light of the life of Yogavatar Lahiri Mahasaya was the philosophy and idealism of his own guru, Mahavatar Babaji, who expressed his philosophy and idealism to his worthy disciple in these words. Now, these are Babaji's words teaching to Lahiri Baba. And they are, God dwells equally in all. I serve God in all. May you realize and practice this truth. So I'll leave us with this again to reflect on. These are Babaji's words again to Lahiri Baba. God dwells equally in all. I serve God in all. May you realize and practice this truth. So with that, we'll have a short guided meditation, general meditation. Please close the eyes. Sitting with our spine straight, keeping our concentration in the soul center or fontanelle. Let us inhale, long, slow, deep. Hold the breath and bow. Bow is an act of surrender, an act of love, offering our hearts at the feet of God and the Masters, praying that they will bless us, guide us, give us motivation, lead us to truth. Please inhale, long, slow, deep. Hold and slowly sit up. Exhale. Normal conscious breathing. Gurudev said, learn to love the breath, meaning pay attention to it. Open the mind to this deep teaching that this breath is this link to God, that this breath is the manifestation of God itself. To love the breath is to love God. Let us take some long, slow, deep breaths with the attitude that we are inhaling love, the presence of God within the breath, and exhaling peace as we settle into deeper, quieter states of consciousness. Please inhale, long, slow, deep. Inhale, love. Hold the breath. Exhale, peace. Hold. Please inhale, long, slow, deep. Inhale, love. Hold. Exhale, peace. Hold. 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 Hold. Inhale love. Hold. Exhale peace. Normal conscious breathing. The mind will be quieter now, so let us just sit in a state of unobstructed awareness, silent meditation. Please inhale, long, slow, deep. Hold and bow. Exhale. Bowing to God and the Masters. Bowing with gratitude. Bowing with love. O God, let us behold Thee in all these names and forms. Let us serve Thee in all these names and forms. Let us ever remember Thee. Let us ever sing Thy glory. Let Thy name be ever on our lips. May we abide in Thee forever and ever. Amen. Please sit up. Concluding prayer. Om Asato Ma Sat Gamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotir Gamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. O God, O Masters, please lead us from ignorance to truth, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May the blessings of God and the Masters be upon us all. And I leave us once again with this philosophy and idealism that Babaji shared with Lahiri Baba. God dwells equally in all. Let's change the I to we, will serve God in all. May we all realize and practice this truth. Thank you. Om.